bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The Cynic Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cynic Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cynic.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Agree?
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
This is the greatest show of all time.
Hey now, everybody, and this is episode 181 of the Cynic Radio Podcast, and I'm your one-armed, broken-down scroll of a co-host, Cynic, and joining me, as always, my multiverse traveling friends, Igri and Ryan. And on this week's show, we're going to do a quick overview of Marvel's Secret Invasion, and then we're going to see what the guys think, whether the secret or the invasion is worth talking about. And then Ryan's going to get us off and running with DC's latest offering, The Flash. So we have a lot to get into. Let's talk about it. Ryan, tell me what you feel the overview of Secret Invasion and what's the plot? Why are we watching this?
I don't know. I think what I like about Marvel and what they've been doing with the shows is all the shows, it gives them a chance to offer different tones. And so there's something for everybody. So, this is kind of like their spy, thriller, show. And I'm fine with it. I appreciate that they're doing something different. It feels different. It's a little weird because it's strange seeing aliens in a spy thriller. But and I've heard, obviously, I think this came out before Andor and its critical success. But I know that for a lot of people, there are strong comparisons to Andor as it being called kind of like Marvel's Andor. But I doubt that was the intent when they created it. But it definitely seems like that's what it's setting out to be. So it's hard to tell because just like Andor kind of was very much a slow burn, it was, first few episodes, we really didn't know where it was going. I feel like this is kind of the same thing. So, I'm kind of waiting and seeing. It was solid, but, wasn't like, out the gates, like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what's happening next.
No, yeah, it was the slow burn nature that really kind of made me like the episode. I know that people need to be instantly pulled in, but sometimes it's fun to wait and watch and see what happens. And that's what I did. I took a very see what happens approach to the episode, and I ended up enjoying it very much. IG, what do you think of the cast? I mean, we got Sam Jackson, we've got Khaleesi. I mean, the whole crew is there.
Well, the cast so far seems pretty strong, right? I mean, some of the people obviously come from their places in the movies previously, right? What is his name? Mendelsohn? Like he was in Captain Marvel as a Skrull all the way back when that came. So like we're seeing some people that like have been in the MCU doing their thing. Kobe Smulders and Sam Jackson, all these people redoing their stuff. And that's great. We're getting some new people like Emilia Clarke as Gaia or Gia. I think it's Gia. It's working really well, and seeing Emilia do something that isn't Khaleesi that she actually seems to be doing really well in, because I thought that she was very strong in this premiere performance of Secret Invasion. So I think the cast looks great so far. I think that the way that they're portraying their characters really is strong, and it's not unlike Marvel, but it's a little off of the normal Marvel beaten path the way I saw it. And so I'm okay with it. It looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, that Ben Mendelsohn, he is really something, whatever he's on screen. I feel like he stole Rogue One. I really feel like he was one of the bright and shining stars throughout that movie, like really, really strong in his scenes. Just the command of everything around him. It was great. No one does outrage more than Ben Mendelsohn. Like when he screams, it just grabs your attention. Now he's in a little bit of a different role, but a lot more action in this, which I have liked. And seeing Emilia Clarke, it just feels to me like it's the perfect combination of unknowns and knowns. You know, you got people that I've never 100% never seen before in huge roles, but then we also have got the old reliables like Colby Smothers, and we actually kind of got a little bit of Martin Freeman, which I have some questions there. Like, was Everett Ross a Skrull the whole time? And I think we're going to dive a little deeper into that as we go along. The pacing might have turned some people off, but I think you got to stick in there. I think if you're not into it in 3 or 4 episodes, I think you should bail. But I really think that it's something that you can kind of stick with. Ryan, what do you think of the Skrulls overall, as far as just the way they look and how they transform between their host state and them?
Well, I mean, I think I don't know if there's anything particularly, thrilling about their the look.
But is there realism to you? I mean, does it look like a guy in a plastic mask?
No, it's fine. I mean, I'm okay with it. It doesn't look, I'm glad they didn't go see, it doesn't look like they went the CGI route with it. So it seems like it's practical. And they look perfectly fine. I think it's a unique power that they have. And I think that's what makes this really interesting, because you have people who are, could legitimately be like the ultimate spies. It's so, it's near impossible to detect them. So I think that setup does make for an interesting spy movie or show, I should say. So I think that works. But they look fine. It doesn't take me out of it. I think what more takes me out of it is just that there are aliens in a show where the genre is spy thriller, and so it's just weird asking me to focus on that genre. We're so trained by genres that I'm focusing on this as a genre, and then it's like, oh wait, but they're aliens. That's weird. So it's just a little odd, that part of it, but otherwise, it doesn't. I'm good with it.
At least for the first episode, they couldn't have picked a better setting than Russia. Yeah. That's the home of the spy, so to speak, as far as our minds. We've been trained since we were little, Russia, the KGB, the Cold War. So I really like that. And I like the feel of it gives it that old world spy feel, which I absolutely loved. IG, the reception has been mixed. Lowest rating on Rotten Tomatoes of any TV show from Marvel so far. People had a problem with Sam Jackson's performance. People had a problem with the AI pictures in the opening theme. Do you feel any of it's warranted, or is it just the internet being the internet?
It's the internet being the internet, because they all want it to be in the standard cookie cutter thing. And part of what I really appreciate about this is that it's out of the normal mold, right? We're doing something completely different, but there's still a little bit of familiarity, right? Because, Sam Jackson is still Nick Fury, and he's still channeling that energy and acting like that character, but it's not, Avengers Nick Fury. I've had some things happen to me, Nick Fury, since then. So it's like, it's part of the reason I think he's not wearing the eye patch. When he's strong, he wears the eye patch, and he doesn't have it on now. He's a little weaker. And I think that, people want things to be the way they want them to be. Same thing with Star Wars. Every time something comes out that isn't exactly the way, or doing exactly the thing that somebody thinks it needs to be, they want to complain. And I'm like, we've seen literally one episode, and we don't know what's going to happen, what kind of things we're going to see. So give it some time and expect that it's going to be different. The only thing I can maybe agree with is the AI generated titles. And the only reason I agree with that is because, when we're letting AI do work like that, you're taking it away from somebody, from a real person. You're taking work away, or from real people, because usually it's not just one person, it's multiple people doing an animated title sequence. That's the only part that I can get behind. But the show, the writing, and everything else, those are people doing that, and they're doing a great job as far as I can tell. I mean, it's not my favorite thing so far, but again, it's one episode, and they're setting up something that we haven't seen in Marvel yet. So I'm willing to give it all the time it needs.
I will jump in and say there is one. This is a larger issue, is when you're dealing with a world with gods, like literal gods, and people with unbelievable power. Like, this type of situation just seems kind of benign. like, even though it is like bad and lots of people will die and you're blowing up and potentially leading to a world war, like at the end of the day, we're dealing with galaxy spanning beings, people who, just devour worlds, and so this kind of seems small. And then, like, why are 3 people in the middle of, Moscow dealing with it? Can't they bring in the Avengers? So I think there is a larger issue of, it is such a big world, and it's so massive, and with people that are so powerful, that when there's something that seems like it's so important on a global geopolitical scale, why is it just 3 people who are dealing with it? Like, why not bring in the Avengers, or bring in somebody that can fix it up? Surely there's somebody with the powers and tech to figure all this out and stop and nip it in the bud right away.
Well, Ryan, not every tool's a hammer. You know what I mean? And they kind of dealt with this a little bit in Flash. Maybe the Avengers are busy. Maybe they're on vacation. Maybe they're eating chicken wings somewhere. Who knows? But we can't. Not every Marvel movie can be an Avengers movie. But that kind of speaks to what Ig was saying, and I'm guilty of it too, because they did Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I loved it. I was like, all right, Marvel, great TV show, episodic, fantastic. And then they did WandaVision. I'm like, oh, what the fuck? Because I wasn't the biggest fan of WandaVision at all. Like it became cringe for me to watch it. So I'm guilty of that in times too, where I want something different, but at the same time, I want some familiarity in my the product. I want some superheroes in tights, but at the same time, this seems like it has just enough of that that it's going to keep me interested. So I understand where the internet's coming from, and I do understand what you're saying, IG, about the AI opening, but at the same time, I feel like it fits the show so well. It's something different that nobody's done before yet, as far as the TV shows, and this is kind of something new for Marvel. So I think it was a risk, but I think it kind of paid off. Well, we'll close it with this. IG, after one episode, would you recommend it?
I would. It's, again, I'm probably with you. It's not my favorite Marvel thing so far. I guess they've done some. I love What If. That was really good. I liked Loki. And Falcon and Winter Soldier were great. I probably liked this first episode probably twice as much as the first episode of WandaVision. Some of the later WandaVision ones I liked, but the first one was really, I didn't like that at all. So yeah, I would recommend it. Especially if you're somebody who likes like Jason Bourne kind of movies, or Taken, or things like that, where there's some other stuff going on. Maybe give this a shot. So maybe even if you're not a Marvel fan, but you like those kind of things, give it a shot.
How about you, Ryan? Would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say if you're a Marvel fan, I would stick with it. I've liked all the Marvel shows, even WandaVision. I thought I really enjoyed WandaVision too, but for the most part, I don't think there's a Marvel show that I didn't like. I think She-Hulk maybe was up and down, but I appreciate that, again, they're going for different tones, and they're trying for it. So I'm okay. I like it so far. It seems interesting. If you're a fan of Marvel stuff, keep watching it. If you're not a fan of Marvel stuff, there's probably better spy shows to watch on TV. So that would be my recommendation so far.
Well, I would think that you would be a fan of Marvel if you're tuning in, but I also think that you have to enjoy the slow burn and the intrigue, and sometimes painstakingly storytelling, but you're only getting it in bits and pieces, and it may not be completely accurate by the time you get to the end. And I think we're going to see a lot of that with who's a Skrull and who's not. And there's theories floating around that Nick Fury could have been a Skrull all along, or since Captain Marvel. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I would probably recommend it to most people, but I would know people with short attention spans probably aren't going to love this project, and maybe wait till the end before I actually go out and tell people, yeah, you should probably watch this. Because there's nothing more disappointing than someone coming back to you going, yeah, I checked out after the first episode. You lose all street cred as far as recommendations go when that happens. All right, Ryan, it's been a couple weeks since we've seen The Flash. Get us off and running. What did you think?
Yeah, sure. So, all right, so I guess to start, and I'll ask you this first, Cynic. There was obviously a lot of controversy surrounding this film, mostly based on Ezra Miller's antics, but there was a lot of chaos surrounding Warner Brothers. However, at some point we started to hear some positive buzz coming out, and that may or may not have changed in the weeks leading up to it. But I think that the buzz, there was some momentum building up until its release. So going into it, did you have high expectations, low expectations, ambivalent? Like, where were you coming into this?
I'm not the biggest Ezra Miller fan. Like, I was a little disappointed they didn't go with what's his name, Gus Gustafson.
Grant Gustin.
Yeah, from the TV's Flash, when they were going to do Justice League, because I just think he fits the part. But I'm not a huge Ezra Miller fan, and the stuff we heard really kind of turned me off even more to him. I mean, I kind of liked his bumbling, secret identity a little bit, but at the same time, it wore at me at times during like Justice League and Batman vs Superman and such. I didn't think we needed a Flash film. I think that it's kind of a one-note power, and there's only so much you can do with it other than the practical tricks of traveling around and fast and moving people and sort of like what we got in the opening with the babies. I feel like there's only so much of that you can do, and it works better in a team film than it does individually. So no, I wasn't super excited about it, but once they released that Michael Keaton trailer, of course I was in.
How about you, Ig? Were you excited leading up to it?
When they first announced it, and before we got any of this news about Ezra Miller being the giant asshole, I was pretty excited about it because I thought that when he showed up in the Justice League movie, I think he was doing a pretty okay job as far as the Flash. I was right there with Cynic where I thought it should have been the guy from the CW, but if this is the way they're going to go, he seemed like a good fit, and then he turned into a giant asshole. And most of the time, if people are jerks or doing something stupid or whatever, I can separate that and say, look, they're here to be entertainment, and whatever they do in their personal life, the only reason it's news is because the news has nothing better to report on. So they're going to let us know every time somebody famous does something stupid. But he just kept doing something stupid and just thing after thing after thing after thing. And so like he has been in so many different news cycles with just his terrible, terrible behavior that it really kind of soured me a little bit just alone on that. But again, I'm right there with Cynic because I will see just about anything Michael Keaton does. So when we got that kind of, especially in the trailer, when they showed Michael Keaton, I'm in, because like I remember being in high school when Michael Keaton's first Batman movie came out, and I went and stood in line overnight to get tickets because there was no online ticketing then. So I stood in line at the theater that was going to play it in my town
Back in my day.
and got tickets and saw it at the first showing. And man, it was such a different Batman feeling because we'd seen a little bit of animated stuff, right? With Super Friends and things like that. And then the Adam West Batman from the 60s, and that's the Batman that she had so far. And then you got this, and it was so much better. And Jack Nicholson was amazing. So I was ready to see him as Batman again. So, I my expectations were tempered, I would say, more than anything going into this because, DC has had such a struggling run where some of the stuff is pretty good and then something happens and it maybe just goes the other direction.
But you got to give it to Ezra Miller because he was approaching Shia LaBeouf territory as far as just destroying a promising career, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they've done that already. Like, they were barely available during press junkets. And it seems like
that might have been a conscious decision though.
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
not set him out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing is like, I preferred their approach to the Flash. I actually preferred it over Grant Gustin because I thought Grant Gustin was just a little too mopey and I he was fine, but I actually liked Ezra Miller better as the Flash. Maybe a little annoying as it gets alluded to during the movie, but yeah, I mean, I think like everybody, once all that stuff started to come out, it's like, yeah, I can't support this. And then 1 minute or 1 second of like Michael Keaton, and it's like, all right, I have to go watch this movie. There's no way I can't watch it. So I think I'm right there with you guys as far as I think being completely turned off by Ezra Miller's behavior to the point of not wanting to see the movie, and then it's shifting.
My thing is that they used Michael Keaton literally to save this movie.
Yeah.
Okay. How bad was that Batgirl movie that Michael Keaton was supposedly in it and
Yeah.
they shelved it?
Who
Like, we'll
knows?
never see it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so getting to the movie. So the movie starts with this fun sequence that Cynic you alluded to about Barry saving a bunch of babies and even a service animal. Did you think Cynic? Did you think that sequence kind of set the right tone for the film, or were you kind of turned off by the chaos and maybe weird CGI?
I don't know if I would have led with that, but that encompasses the Flash. This is what he does, right? They alluded to later that he can't just move people. He's got to kind of nudge the environment around them so they don't get hurt or get sick. And the same thing with the babies. But this is the one note that is the Flash, being able to move faster than everything around him, and everything looks in slow motion. It's kind of what I was talking about. I like the scene, but we're not going to get much more than that out of this movie.
Mm-hmm. So we find out pretty early on that Barry's main focus in the movie is to get his dad out of prison. His dad's been wrongfully convicted of killing his mother. We get a little bit of a flashback to the events that led to the mother's death, and Barry discovers then that he can travel back in time. This sets the stage for the movie as Barry finds himself knocked into the wrong time and meets his younger self. And once again, we're dealing with the time travel multiverse type of story. Ig, are we reaching multiverse fatigue? We've had Doctor Strange, the Spider-Verse movies, Everything Everywhere All at Once, No Way Home, Loki. Do you feel like we're reaching fatigue with the multiverse, or were you okay with this?
Because it's such a shallow note, because I think, if you go back and now you change things as the Flash specifically, that's going to change everything. You don't become the Flash. So like it's that whole time travel paradox thing. Like there's a lot of multiverse things going on, and this is kind of multiversey, except that it's more time than it is different universe. Yeah, I mean, I know it ends up being a different universe because we have a different Batman, different other things going on, but some of that might simply be because of things Barry did, right? Barry moving through time, like we get a different Batman. We get, because it's the butterfly effect, right? One small thing happens. And I do think there's a little bit of fatigue going on because, like, I think about the vast amount of villains available to both Marvel and DC. Why do we need to keep going like off in tangents to get villains in some of these things? We don't need to be in other universes. We don't need to be doing things like that. I mean, are you telling me that John Krasinski wouldn't take the huge bag of money that Marvel would throw at him if they really wanted him to be Reed Richards? Because I'm sure he would. I mean, I know he's doing Jack Ryan and all that, but like he's got time to, put a little gray streak on the side of his head and pretend to be stretchy. And that's the thing is like, how many different like big time DC villains have we not seen in this new stuff? Like we haven't seen Lex Luthor. And as far as I'm concerned, he's like the biggest bad in all of DC. So, I mean, I know that there's people that are stronger, like, Apocalypse and things like that they kind of showed that I think was really poorly done. But why do we have to keep going in other directions and other things? And maybe for this one, they needed it because they really wanted to put Michael Keaton back in it. But why do we keep doing new Batmans? Like, that series had like 3 different Batmans. Then we get Christian Bale, and then we get Robert Pattinson or Ben Affleck, then Pattinson. Like, can we get some consistency in some of this stuff? That's one of the things I'm hoping James Gunn is going to end up finding a way to do, is getting some consistency in the stories they're going to tell. Because that's one thing that Marvel has done really well. Like, how many times did we get Iron Man in a movie played by Robert Downey Jr.? It was a lot. So, but that really helped us connect with it. And so when he died at the end of the last Avengers movie, like we all like had the feels and shed tears and everything because we'd been attached to the guy for so long. But when you keep changing things like this, it makes it really hard. So yeah, I think multiverse fatigue, and then everything keeps changing, so we don't really get attached to anything. So it's a little combination.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with the villain thing. I actually think this is the one of the rare points where I think if we had another villain, it would have been a nightmare trying to get a backstory. So it kind of worked that the villain was somebody that we were familiar with from before. Although, if you watch Michael Shannon interviews, he was just kind of like, "Well, yeah, I was just there to read some lines and basically be an action figure because I had zero story." So I think I get why they didn't have a villain for the story because of the it was much more, at the end of the day, it was an internal, like there was an internal conflict. It was the primary conflict in the story, and Zod was just a piece. But yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. But okay, Cynic, if you could run back in time to any point and change something, what would it be?
This podcast, this particular podcast, because it's going off the rails. No, run back in time and change anything. Does it involve a sports almanac? Can I grab one of those and possibly pick it up and make a little bit of money? Because I'm all for that. Anything, I'm looking at financial hardship coming up, so I definitely could throw some money on the trash shows cheating and winning the World Series. I would definitely be down for that. Yeah. How about you, Ig?
Maybe go back and get a Choco Taco or something since they took them away or something. I can't imagine. Again, I would worry about things like the butterfly effect. Literally anything changes anywhere in the past, even if you do just your own past. How much worse could it be? Like, you might set something like maybe it's better, but maybe it's way worse. Like you could do the money thing, and then all of a sudden, like somebody offs you because you have too much money, and they're trying to get it from you.
Well, and the wife and I talk about this a lot. Like we're, close to middle age. We wish we would have met sooner. We've only been together a couple of years. But if we changed any of those things that happened before we met, we may not have met. If we weren't married previously, if we didn't date on an app, if we didn't do all these things, it led us to where we are. So ultimately, to answer your question seriously, no, I wouldn't go back and change anything because I'm happy where I am right now, despite some of the circumstances in my life. I met the cell phone ringtone of my dreams.
Well, yeah, I think that's fair. Like I tend to agree. Unless I go back with the knowledge that I have now, then it's like you just risk too much. Like I think I'm in a very good place, and happy, and what happens if I go back and change one little thing? And so unless like I said, if I go back with this knowledge, then sure, I start buying Bitcoin as much as I possibly can when I read that first article about it when it first came out. But other than that, unless I have the knowledge that I have now, probably wouldn't risk it. So to me, I know we discussed a little bit about Ezra Miller's performance. One of the more impressive aspects of the movie was Ezra Miller's performance against themselves. I thought they did a really good job between the actual performance and the special effects. I actually forgot that it was the same actor playing the same person. Cynic, what were your thoughts on Ezra Miller's performance?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic. Even though the alternate Barry grated on me in the beginning. In the very beginning, he was almost unbearable. To the point where I wanted to get up and leave the movie. He got more and more, he toned it down as the story went on. But in the beginning, I absolutely hated him. But they played off each other well, and you really do forget that you're looking at the same person. I thought it was fantastic the way they did it.
Yeah. What about you, Ig?
Yeah, same. Yeah, he did it as much as as Ezra Miller as a person, probably needs to be put somewhere under lock and key and close supervision. He did a good job with that role.
Yeah. So we find out coincidentally that the day that Barry arrives happens to be the same day that new Barry is set to get his powers. So old Barry takes new Barry, or old Barry takes young Barry, to get struck by lightning. And eventually they both get struck, giving young Barry powers and taking powers away from old Barry. This leads to some fun gags, but is Barry being way too rash and impulsive throughout this movie, between just going back in time in the first place and then doing this? Like, is it just... Does any of it make sense? Like any of his decisions throughout the movie, do any of them make sense in it, Cynic?
No, I don't believe they do. but I think they're necessary to drive the story. I don't think we needed the Frankenstein Barry story. I just don't think we needed it. Like, make us jump through more hoops to get new Barry his powers, but not old Barry losing his powers and then having to go back and get them. I just thought it made the movie longer than it needed to be. I thought, them shocking him with lightning on purpose was a little silly, and it just didn't fit in the flow of the story, and I don't think we needed to go that route with it. If that was my one big complaint with the movie, that would probably be it, was that sequence of things.
Yeah,
I would think that like it really turns into maybe they're going to try and get kids out there trying to find ways to get shocked to see if it gives them some kind of power now. That they almost oversimplified what gave the Flash his power. I mean, as far as that type of Flash his power, because it was a combination of electricity and whatever chemicals were supposed to be in whatever lab in the comics. Like, it was not just one thing. It was a combination of things just lining up right that kind of changed the Flash to make things work. And I don't think they spent enough time trying to get to that I mean, they didn't put up a warning on the screen like, hey, don't go try and shock yourself with huge amounts of electricity, because you're not going to get fast. You're going to get dead. And I worry about that a little bit. Yeah. So that was none of it made sense.
Well, fortunately, nobody saw the movie, so I don't think we're going to deal with that problem.
Yeah, 12 people.
Yeah. So
we're three of them.
We're three of them. Well, it goes back to this, okay? It's like my rant with the Tide Pods. We were watching On Patrol Live, and there was this dog in the street, and it was just looking to get itself ran over. And they chased the dog all over, and it kept running back out in the street. If people are going to go out and purposely try to shock themselves with lightning, I can't say I feel bad about that. Like, they're not going to go on to further help society in any way. So, let them be. Let them go make their bad mistakes.
So Zod attacks, and Barry realizes that he's in a world that has no metahumans. They decide to seek out the help of Superman. I mean, sorry, it's not Batman. So, Ig, what were your thoughts on seeing Michael Keaton back as Bruce Wayne and Batman?
Man, he's still probably real close to my favorite Batman, after all this time and everything. And there's just something about the way that Michael Keaton played Batman, just something about the tone, the way he talked, the way he moved, even though he couldn't turn his head and everything, like it was just because it was the first actual Batman like Batman that, because like the 60s TV show was so like campy and, pow and wham and kablam and everything else. Like, it was fun, and I liked that Batman, but like seeing this, dark and Tim Burton Batman movie, it was just an amazing thing. And seeing him back, like with all of his stuff, right? There's the Batwing and the Batmobile and all that's, it was just like nostalgia. And I guess, maybe I'm just aging myself even further, but it really kind of felt like home, right? And, that felt like, I'm Batman rather than, I'm Batman, or no, I'm Batman, real cool. And just like, I don't need to yell it from the rooftops. I can just whisper it to a bad guy and strike fear into his heart. And he emulates that role really well. I mean, and again, it's Michael Keaton, everything he's done has been great. Like even Vulture in the Spider-Man movie was great. Like I was really excited. So I don't know how else I can say it.
How about you, Seneca? What were your thoughts on seeing Michael Keaton back in the Cape and Cowl?
Well, it was kind of like seeing Tobey as Spider-Man again, even though he was a little older, and you could tell the nostalgia ran thick. I mean, that was our first Spider-Man in live action, and it was awesome. Back then, even though now we look at those Spider-Man films and they were heavily flawed, the same with the Batman films. There were issues with it, like him not being able to turn his neck and some of the stories, but Tim Burton was perfect for that time. Yeah, it was great seeing him back as Batman. I always thought that they should have tried to stick him in somewhere and revisit that. Because I think it ended prematurely, even though the movies kind of went off the rails as well after the second one. I think he Well, be everybody's favorite Batman that's probably over 40 years old. You know, it's hard to replace that feeling of seeing the very first modernized superhero film. I mean, because we had Superman previous to that, but this was the first live action Batman, and it was awesome for its time.
Yeah, definitely echo with you the feeling. It's like this is, I think I didn't appreciate how much he was kind of my Batman or our Batman until kind of seeing him again. And so it was an awesome part of the movie. And it, if we just had that, it would have been, I'll go see it again and again just to see him in it. So the team heads to Russia where they find Supergirl or Kara Zor-El. We get a fun little action sequence of them rescuing her, but I couldn't help but feel like her character was kind of completely glossed over. Cynic, what were your thoughts on the character and what she was given to work with in the movie?
Well, they certainly didn't give her a lot of lines, but I felt that might be because she wasn't as humanized as Clark Kent. She didn't spend as much time with people. At least that's what I got from the part, was that, she showed up and she was taken captive fairly quickly in her life and had been there for quite some time. So her not being able to communicate or even trust humans from this planet, I kind of understood that. I mean, I would have liked to see her do a little bit more lifting acting wise, but I enjoyed her in the role very much.
I want to know why the hell she was able to speak English. I mean, Clark Kent was raised in the Midwest, Ma and Pa Kent, right? Went to school, did all of those things, right? This young lady was like basically stuck in the bottom of a hole, and the only people around her probably spoke Russian. So why does she speak English?
Well,
and without an accent, like, it's not like I'm going to kill you now. I'm looking for moose and squirrel. No, none of that, right? So it's some of the stuff, like the decisions, like where some of my problems really arise outside of Ezra Miller, are some of the decisions that they made with how they did some of the stuff. Well,
I mean, if we're thinking that this is in the Man of Steel world or somewhere close to, or the Snyderverse, I guess, in Man of Steel, the Kryptonians spoke English. So unless there's something I'm forgetting.
Yeah, but they left as a baby.
No,
so
she left at I think it was like 13. So she left older, and she was sent to protect Kal-El. So I believe that's her story. Is she was sent as like a teenager or preteen. So she already knew when she was sent, like, hey, this is your mission when you arrive, is protect him. And I think things happen where he arrives first and she doesn't arrive until after. But that would explain it. Yeah, that would be a completely messed up if like she just landed and could speak English. Well, yeah, after leaving as a baby. But I do think that she had a chance to grow up on Krypton, and that's why she speaks English. Now, why do Kryptonians speak English? That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I think that part at least is not a major logical issue if we accept that other planets can speak English.
Can we all agree that she was fantastic as Supergirl? Like the departure from the blonde hair, blue-eyed.
Yeah, oh no, she looks great.
I don't know what people's problem was with that. Like, because she had short hair, because everyone's suddenly transphobic about everything.
Yeah.
I thought she was fantastic. I liked it.
I thought the costume looked great. I think she looks good. She looked good in it. She was very like she projected power, and even the performance was fine. I just felt like she got very little to work with. But like, hey, with everything that we got in this movie, like, you got to go give up something. So eventually old Barry gets his powers back and they decide to face off with Zod. Ig, was their plan doomed from the beginning, seeing as how they're facing off with a bunch of Kryptonians who basically can't be killed?
Yeah, like you'd think that Barry would know better, right? Like after like going to try and like do something to Superman right when he was resurrected in Justice League, right? You like Superman like was able to keep up and like throw him off of his path, and like you can't just sneak up on him. You can't run faster than they can see. None of that's going to work. So like he already knows. Why is that your plan? Like you need to come up with a better plan. That's not a strong plan.
Yeah, I agree. It was doomed from the beginning, but this is why I've always felt Marvel was better than DC, because I thought Superman throws off the balance of power. when you have Superman, what do you need anybody else for?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to what you were saying about why not bring in the Avengers.
Yeah.
What's the necessity of Batman if we've got Superman?
Yeah.
So I've always thought that Superman was the fatal flaw in the DC universe.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that it's a fatal flaw. I think it's just a matter of like you have to be very creative with your storytelling to work around the fact that he's so powerful, and then it does become a challenge. Like, yeah, if you have any kind of threat, like Superman can take care of it. So then you have to make the threat so numerous that Superman can't do anything, and then that becomes the story is like Superman not being, having all the power to do anything, but not being able to be everywhere at once becomes something interesting, I guess. So we get a messy third act, which, I mean, look, all these superheroes turn into. Batman and Supergirl keep dying. The two Flashes keep reversing time to try to bring them back. Eventually, old Barry realizes that they can't win. But young Barry is obsessed with figuring out a way to win. And then we get a scene with them in the Speed Force trying to figure out what to do. And in that sequence, we get to see a number of possible worlds. We see Adam West Batman, George Reeves Batman, Christopher Reeves Superman, George Reeves Superman, Christopher Reeve as Superman, and we get the Nick Cage Superman, which I did pop for. Cynic, what were your thoughts here? And did it hit as I think they wanted it to hit?
Oh, absolutely. I think it did. And I don't, once again, I didn't read any of the articles because they infuriated me on the internet about what the problems were with the cameos, about sticking dead people in the movie. Whatever the issues were, stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. It's a movie. It's fun. I'm sure some sort of royalties will probably be kicked to those people's families or whatever for them showing up. It worked. It was fun. It was interesting. It was something different. Watching these worlds collide was kind of cool. Even the little bits of audio that they played when the former heroes showed up, I thought it all worked. Despite the third act being a mess, this was the one thing that I thought was pretty interesting. And I didn't realize from the Nick Cage thing that Kevin Smith had basically written that screenplay. So it made me like it more, the fact that it actually came on the screen, and he couldn't have been happier about it when he was giving interviews. So, and he even said himself, I've got no problem with dead people showing up. And he said, when I die, throw me in porn. Yeah. I don't care. And I'm sure the dead don't either.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I feel like as long as their estates were okay with it, like, it's fine. My issue more was maybe the look of it. So like I liked it, and especially liked seeing the Nick Cage Superman. But this then does get to my next question, Ig. Much has been made of the CGI in this movie, and I think that there were issues, including the Speed Force. So I guess what are your thoughts on the CGI and the quote unquote choice to go with PlayStation 2 CGI for the Speed Force?
The fact that they had more than 2 years to work on this for the CGI, because I mean the movie was basically done 2 years ago, and so they've been sitting on it for that long. They had 2 years to mess with it. And some movies they're messing with up to like 2 weeks before they come out, doing things to adjust it and fix and make things look better and redo the sound editing and everything else. So like they had time. Did no one see that some of the CGI was as bad as it was? Like those babies looked worse than the one in American Sniper. Like they were bad babies. They did not look good. The stuff in the Speed Force was horrendous when you have so many things that you can work with. Like I know that like Industrial Light and Magic still outsources and will do things for other studios. Just because they belong to Disney doesn't mean that if you come with a bag of money, they won't make some good CGI for you. This was some of the worst CGI in the last 5 to 10 years. And especially for a movie with this big of a thing and this big of a budget, it was not good. Like they are going to have a hard time trying to justify why they left it that way. Especially like they had too many big parts, too many big moving things, and too many things to build into a new start for their DCU, that not putting the right kind of things into this, and it might actually be part of the reason it's not making the money it should, is that visually, like they had some things that had the potential to be absolutely amazing, and just kind of, while the premise of what was going on was great, the execution was by far lacking.
But isn't this why we're in the situation we are with DC? It's the good enough approach to things.
Yeah,
It seems to be in everything they do. It's it's good enough.
Well, the interesting thing also with the CGI too is what made it worse for me. So I like the ideas to an extent. Like I think I like what they were going for with the Speed Force. It just looked terrible, and I don't buy the excuse that they were going for that kind of look, because you could have gone for he's in this different world, and the world's going to look different, and you could have done it and made it look good. What made it worse was, say what you want about Man of Steel. Man of Steel looked great. Like, Zack Snyder is a great, visual director. Say what you want about his story and everything else. Like, Man of Steel looked great. I love the way that it presented Superman. There were some iconic shots. The way that he showed his powers looked great. And this movie is constantly comparing itself to Man of Steel, which came out 10 years ago and blows this movie away in looks. So I think that was a big negative on it. Was like, yeah, the CGI was bad, and you're comparing yourself to a movie that came out 10 years ago and looked really good. In comparison,
looked a lot better.
Yeah, like Man of Steel can come out today and it blows this movie away effects wise. Like, it's just it's crazy that they had not learned.
Well, it's your near Freudian slip there. It was Man of Steel versus Man of Stool. I mean, the CGI was shit. It was. I mean, I didn't expect a lot, and I didn't get a lot from it. It was just like, okay, this is what we're doing, and hopefully it gets better from here. And it set the tone from the very first scene. That,
exactly.
You're going to get a lesser quality movie because they were probably past fuck it over there at DC. They saw the end was near, and I mean, there was rumors that every movie goes through reshoots. They got to the reshoot portion of Aquaman, and they said, we got no more budget, so you're gonna have to go with. So I'm gonna go on record now and say, I bet you Aquaman doesn't get released. I bet you they end up pulling it.
Maybe. Well, in the end, Barry has to go back in time and actually cause an action that will lead to his mother's death. And I think we get what is one of the best superhero endings to me. So everything bad about this movie is almost made up for in that one scene between Barry and Nora. Cynic, to you, does that scene, was it as good for you as it was for me? But also, does that scene make up for the chaotic third act?
No, but it does give merit to the movie. It makes it a watchable movie. It drives home the exact emotional notes that were probably missing from the rest of the film. Mm-hmm. It gave the film a pulse. Yeah. And I really liked him making that decision, but also showing that he learned nothing from this whole situation, turning that camera so his dad got out in the end.
Well, that was next question is Barry tries to pull a fast one on time by putting that tomato can on a higher shelf. This means that his dad is clearly shown on the video camera, thus giving him an alibi. But I guess I wasn't even questioning that part of it, which is he shouldn't have done it. He clearly had not learned his lesson. But does that alibi mean that he couldn't have killed his mom, Ig? Like, I feel like that doesn't change anything. He could still have gotten home and killed the mom. Like, what is the alibi? I don't get it. Was I missing something?
And that's the thing is, like, he's like, well, we can't see that that's him, so maybe it's not. And that puts a man in prison? No. Yeah. Because, like, you need to have something more than, like, hey, he was at the store. Yeah. Like, well, she's been dead 12 minutes instead of 7. Like, what? Nobody's that precise, like, especially when somebody's that freshly dead, like that wouldn't save anybody. And it's like, why is that a thing? Why are we paying attention to that? Like, I understand that Flash is young, right? And obviously wants to have whatever relationship with whatever parent he can. And he probably believes that his dad is innocent, and maybe he is. Maybe he's not. But that doesn't exonerate anything, because if they convicted him, they had to have something else. Unless, this is like really kind of standard kind of thing where people get convicted that shouldn't, and people that are huge criminals get to walk the earth and do whatever. That seems like a Gotham and Metropolis type of thing anyway. So let's just let it be that way. I just don't see why he doesn't learn his lesson, right? You know, like he knows that his mom still has to die for things to be right.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get it.
Yeah. So the movie ends with one more fun cameo with George Clooney. So, Ig, give me your favorite cameo, MVP, thoughts, and rating.
Obviously, favorite cameo is got to be, you know, the original Batman. We're getting him back. Although my second is the Nick Cage, because, you know, if I'm sitting here kind of feeling down about things, I will just go watch that Kevin Smith speech about him writing a Superman movie. You know, he's like, I don't want to call him Superman. I don't want him to wear the suit, and I don't want to see him fly. You know, and it's like got a third act and a giant spider. I will just go watch that because it just gets me giggly every single time. So seeing the Nick Cage thing, and I remember seeing some documentary about like when they were going to make Superman, and they had like him doing test fittings and that, and like it looked terrible. But seeing that in this movie, that was probably my second favorite thing. You know, the movie is begrudgingly okay. It's not my favorite DC movie. It's certainly not my favorite superhero movie. But it had some things in there that really kind of gave me some feels. And biggest one being Michael Keaton. You know, I mean, like I said, it kind of felt like home. That was just so exciting to me. And I really had a good time watching it. Third act was such a mess. You know, the Dark Flash, you know, him just kind of every time he comes back, something else is wrong with him and another piece is added on to him. It was so messy, and why Oldberry didn't just like stop him himself, because like he's more aware of how his powers work and could have done something to slow that down and maybe not let him get so eaten up inside. But you know, and the baby shower, oh my God, like that was so cringe inducing for me. Like I didn't like that part at all. I mean, it was kind of funny, but like with the way they did Quicksilver in the first time he showed up in the X-Men stuff, when he was like moving the cops around and moving bullets and things like that, I think that was the best use of like speed that I've seen so far. And they tried to emulate that with the baby shower, and it did not hit the same. But overall, I mean, it was still an enjoyable movie. I still had fun watching it. I had to like separate myself from everything that was going on with Ezra Miller, and Michael Keaton helped with that a ton. Seeing, you know, different Batmans, and especially the George Clooney one at the end, like if somehow, some way they bring George Clooney back as a Batman in some further project, I'm boycotting DC. I'm out at that point. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it was just like, this is Bruce Wayne now, and maybe they don't have a Batman in that world. Maybe. But, you know, I mean, even the different costumes and stuff that they put in, like, I think that was really something to see.
That's always fun.
Yeah, we had a good time there. But I really think that in general, I enjoyed the movie. I think there was a lot of fun things to see. I give it probably a 7.5.
You want me to go next?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So my favorite cameo was the Nick Cage cameo. You know, knowing the whole story of the Superman, and there is a great documentary, I think it's still on Netflix, on that whole story, which is just insane. You know, it coming about, and that they had him fight a spider. Again, if you watch the documentary, is crazy. So I love that cameo. That was a lot of fun. And annoyingly, I didn't think about it at all. And Kevin Smith kind of spoiled it, because I was listening to his podcast before the movie came out, and he had made a little comment of movies that didn't even happen or even cameoed in this. And I was like, oh, that's what came to mind. So I wish I didn't know that, because that would have been even a bigger, you know, reaction out of me. But yeah, that was a great cameo. My MVP for the movie would be Nora Allen, so Barry's mother. I think that she makes the movie work. Like the even though she's barely in it, the actress is named Maribel Verdú, I think, and even though she's not in it for that long, I think she gives such a heartwarming performance. She's so warm and loving. that it makes it work. You buy the chemistry between her and Barry. And then I think, again, that final scene, like I said, it is one of the most moving scenes in a superhero movie. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And so even though the third act was chaotic, that ending works for me. Because to me, I think, we rarely see consequence. And, oddly enough, like Barry then doesn't realize, flippantly forgets that his actions have consequences, but it's somebody actually having to face the consequences of his actions, which we don't get to see a lot in these kinds of movies in any real way. And I think that the performance there, both from Ezra Miller and Maribel Verdú, was just phenomenal. So I love that final scene. The movie, I mean, there's a lot to like. I really did like the Ezra Miller's performance acting against themselves. I love the costume design. I thought the costume design here was among the best in any of the DC movies or TV shows. I love the Flash costume. I love the different Batman costumes. I love that we got a blue and gray Batman with the Batfleck costume. And then when they did that little quick cut to like all of Michael Keaton's costumes, we got another blue and gray. So I like that maybe we'll get a blue and gray Batman, which I'm partial to, and I'd love to see in live action. But even the Supergirl costume looked great. So I think the costume design was really good, and I think practically some of the sets were really well done. It's just that the special effects were terrible, and so among the things that bring this movie down is the effects just look bad, and I think there's just no excuse for it. And especially when comparing itself to Man of Steel. And again, we have just a messy third act, and there's several people who just don't get much to work with. Ben Affleck's barely there. Zod, as we talked about, gets nothing to do. I mean, he's basically the same character from Man of Steel, except with just saying a couple of villainous lines and just kind of standing there and throwing some punches. So I think some characters just don't get much to work with. The same can go with Supergirl. But again, I had fun. I think the nostalgia worked for me. It was a funny movie. The humor worked. Some of it was forced, but overall, I thought the movie really worked with the humor. It really worked with the nostalgia. And I just had a really good time. It's hard for me to give it. It's weird because I think if you grade by the way I felt leaving the theater, I would say 8.5, 9-ish. But really, it has some flaws. So I'm going to say 7.5 is right about where it should be.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks since I've seen it. And I'm going to give my MVP to Ron Livingston as Barry's dad, only because he was the bomb in Office Space. But I'm not going to give you my favorite scene, but I'm going to give you my least favorite scene, which is the cut scene at the end with Jason Momoa. It made no sense. It was just shoehorned in there. It was something for him to do, and it wasn't even creative. Him passing out in a mud puddle. I mean, this is what encompasses everything about the DC universe that, much like a sightseeing tour to the Titanic, it just kind of imploded. It was rough. The whole thing was rough from the beginning to the end. There was some fun parts about the movie. Michael Keaton saved things. I loved Supergirl. It was fun. It was fast. The CGI wasn't great, but there was enough laughs and enough action that it made me happy that I ventured out that Sunday to go see it. I'm not sure what people's problems are with the cameos. I just don't get, listen, I'm a cynic in nature. I'm cynical about everything, but I'm nowhere near some of these people on the internet that just wait around to push buttons on Twitter to tell people how mad they are about everything that fucking happens. I don't understand it. It feels like the further down this rabbit hole we go, there's absolutely no joy in people's lives. They just stay outraged. And I really think it's just a please look at me type of attention getting. I don't think there's any merit to it. It was a lot more fun than I was expected. I think Ezra Miller did a much better job than I thought it would be. It hit some good emotional notes. Overall, I'd probably give it maybe a 6.5. I mean, it was what it was. And I feel that way about a lot of the DC movies. They were movies that we paid to see so we could talk about it and discuss how disappointed we were, sort of like every relationship I've ever been in. So, folks, that about wraps up episode 181 of the Cynic Radio Podcast. You can check out my great, fantastic co-hosts, my friend IG. You can find him at the Jason Tries channel on Twitch. Ryan, you can find him at the Portable Hole Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts fixed. And you can find this show on all the social medias at Cynic Radio. Questions, comments, concerns? You can email the show at cynicradio@gmail.com. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at cynicradio.com. Available for download on iTunes.